The highly anticipated Cull Obsidian is coming to Marvel Snap, and he is going to shake things up. Welcome in, folks. For those who don't know, my name is Guest, also known as ItsGuestGaming, and let's take a look at what Cull Obsidian's going to do outside of the obvious, because we're gonna look at the obvious, we're gonna look at the little idiosyncrasies that are really going to define what he can do, and even look at how some of the new cards like the Season Pass are going to appropriately synergize with him. Let's swing over there and take a look at Cull Obsidian. He's a 410, big, beefy stats, and a very low condition. You can only play this card where you have a 1-cost card. The community did already speak up because there is a little bit of confusion in regards to why bring out such an easy card. And the devs have come forward and said, well, it's not as easy as you think because it is still a condition to be able to play him out, because there are many times that you've wanted your 4 big beefy cards to have a very simple condition. Look at Atuma. All you need is an armor. Look at Sentry. How many times have you wanted to actually play your Sentry into the right-hand leg? What about that Typhoid Mary? Well, did you pull your 0? There's a couple of pieces there that make it seem like it's a negative effect because you have a very limited way in which you can use it. However, if you build your deck around exactly what he in particular is going to do, I think this is an incredibly strong card, and I think the community at large is basically thinking the same thing. Let's dive into a couple of core mechanics of understanding what he is, because it is a pretty straightforward effect, right? It is put down a 1-cost card, and now you're allowed to play this card. Pretty simple. 1-cost cards, they have their ups and their downs, but depending on which one you can move around, we might actually be able to skirt around that. I'll show you what I mean in one of the decks in a moment, because the good thing is if the 1-cost disappears, say it moves or is destroyed, that's okay. It's not going to remove the effect of Cull Obsidian and destroy him. So as long as the 1-cost is there, either prior or when you stage him, which is a huge effect in my opinion, that is fantastic. So imagine there's no other assistance, it's turn 5, you can play down your Iceman plus Cull Obsidian because it's now in staging mode and somewhere on the battlefield. That is a big piece to him to understanding what can we do with this, even if we can curve him out on turn 4 by playing other cards prior to it, like the Season Pass Black Swan. So imagine Black Swan going down on 3, and then you can drop a free 1-drop plus Cull Obsidian on turn 4. That's a very, very strong synergy for me, in my opinion, because sometimes you're gonna miss that. Sometimes you're gonna wish you could play the Cull Obsidian, you have great stats, but the 1-cost, maybe it's in another lane. And that's something that we as a community are also gonna have to battle around the opposite way, at least during the release week of this card, where if you see a 1-cost, be ready to probably see a Cull Obsidian just because it's going to be a very popular card. Last piece is why 10 and why not 9? Because he previously was data mined at a 4-9, and Second Dinner also has come through and explained that they want the synergy with Scar in particular to be a critical factor. I do also personally think, I don't know this for a fact, but I think it has something to do with Shang-Chi as well, where yes, you can put him down, but he could essentially die to Shang-Chi very early on because he's a better play on turns 4 and 5, in my opinion, versus a big clunky 4-drop on turn 6. Even if you Zabu it, it still seems a little bit clunky to me if you try to do it a little later, so I'm looking at it as either cheating it out or curving it out in particular on turn 4. So let's take a look at what we can actually do with Cull Obsidian in a couple of unique decks. To me, this one's a no-brainer. This is Thanos' Black Order. It's a pretty strong Thanos deck. You have stones, you can play them down for free with Black Swan, you have Supergiant in there, and Cull Obsidian. Look, I just wanted to put them all together in a pretty straightforward Thanos deck. This is where a lot of people are going to default first. I don't want to spend too much time on this deck because there's going to be 95 different iterations of this deck. Is Supergiant necessary? No. Can you put in Devil Dinosaur or Leech or any of the other 5-drops? Absolutely, go for it. Are you still cheating out cards with Lockjaw? Yes. I do end up seeing this deck becoming a problem in some way, shape, or form, but I've opted to remove out those 5-drops for Supergiant and Cull Obsidian because, well, theming. Look, you're gonna get Black Swan to drop down a whole bunch of free cards. You could also sub out the Supergiant for something else, of course, but a lot of these other cards, if you don't have Scar and you're not getting out those cheat out big giant drops, you can also substitute a little bit higher as another Lockjaw replacement out. Blob is Blob. This is a straightforward deck, right? We can move past this. All right, let's skip through. Let's play a little bit further into the Scar synergy in particular, so I'm gonna call this Cull Hawk. This is set it all up in the first couple of turns. Your ideal situation is Korg 1, Zabu 2, because this is a very heavy Zabu deck. Probably worthy of saying that if you have Zabu on 2, just go ahead and snap, because you have a couple of other outs in how you can play the deck. On turn 3, if you don't pull it on out, drop your Rock Slide or your Cosmo, try to hide the Sentry behind the Cosmo or play some defense. But why Typhoid Mary? I love the idea of what this deck can potentially do in 2 different ways and have a defensive stance at the same time. Because with Typhoid Mary in particular, if you are playing down your Cull Obsidian, your Dark Hawk, your Sentries, what if you know your opponent has a Shang-Chi and you're in Conquest mode and you need to skirt around it? Well, now you're going on the Typhoid Mary defensive line of keeping everybody at 9 power, which is pretty strong all by itself. Or if you need to go down the cheat line of getting that Scar out faster, go ahead and leave the Typhoid Mary off or just Enchantress it, which is just a great defensive card either way. So I wanted to have 2 different ways you could play the deck with a defensive mechanic. Enchantress isn't necessary in my opinion, but I love the Typhoid Mary idea here because we could get a couple of big beefy 10s while also ramping up a Darkhawk deck at the same time. So having Cull Obsidian just easily drop behind that Korg, or even go 0 Sentry and play the Cull on the 0 lane is relatively good. So Sentry is got 2 major players here. You're going to not run the Annihilus package. I looked at junk for Cull Obsidian. I wasn't as thrilled about the idea of another beefy 4-drop with how the junk decks typically work, even just the simple Annihilus package. But if you want to take out Enchantress and put in an Annihilus, try saying that 3 times fast, I couldn't blame you. 1-cost cards, beefing them up, Zoo deck, right? So this is Igneouzoo. We want to move forward all those 1-drops and spread wide for the Dazzler effect in particular here. So we're playing out our Ant-Man, our Spider-Ham, and Squirrel Girl in particular because I like the idea of spreading wide but not needing to dump the entire hand, because you've got Squirrel Girl and Shauna who go wide with the 1-drops, and then you look at how do you need to beef them up. I love the new Electra also in this deck because we are going to see a lot of 1-drops due to Cull Obsidian coming to the game. So it's a good defensive play for turn 2 or turn 3, depending on the style of deck that you're going up against. So let's go ahead and reinforce and protect all of our 1-drops with Kyera and then start ramping them up. You have your Kazari, you have your Blue Marvel, and Valkyrie, who I love in this deck as well, giving a little bit of reinforcement to cards like your Ant-Man or those original Squirrel tokens or zombie ones if you have that pack still. This is just going to be a fun Zoo deck. Is it going to be meta competitive? Probably not, but if it's something worth having fun for, I think Cull Obsidian makes this deck a whole lot better, because if you can't ramp up a 1-drop, why not drop a 4-drop that has 10 attached to it? This one, I'm not gonna lie, I'm cheating here. This is Volcanic Knight. We are taking the deck that I took to Infinite last season, and we're modifying it for Cull Obsidian because it fits so perfectly into what this deck wants to do. It has Zabu in here, it has Moon Girl in here, it has 1-drops in here, it has She-Hulk in here, it has Scar in here, it has Kyera, it has literally everything I'm looking for in this deck. Cull Obsidian is such an organic fit because you have so many different options of how you can play the Cull Obsidian into this deck. You can put down your Black Knight on 1 because you're already putting down a 1-drop, and if things don't go well for your discard with Blade or Lady Sif, you still have a 4/10 you can drop onto that lane without having to discard anything. We're limiting our 6-drops. I pulled Magneto out of this build just to put Cull Obsidian, so you are messing with your Lady Sif a little bit here, where if it doesn't hit the Infinite, you are more likely to now only hit your Scar or She-Hulk. But I think the Cull Obsidian backup play for this deck is fantastic. Imagine Moon Girling as well. Then that Cull Obsidian can become a 3-cost card. And if it's Zabu'd as well, it's just going to be an incredibly cheap and powerful card. I love the Moon Girl shell for him. I love the Black Knight shell for him. And I hope you enjoy the Volcanic Knight as well. Lastly, I've been alluding to this deck. It's a Surfer deck, but hear me out here, okay? One of the biggest downsides of the Surfer deck has been watching to see how certain cards ramp and playing off curve, losing mana on turn 4. Well, what if we can fix that because we put down our Nova? or our Forge. This is what this deck is going to do, and we have time to be able to enjoy what it's going to do as well. So put down the Forge or Nova early on. Then you can reinforce in other directions, because remember, if that Nova's down and you play the Cull Obsidian on curve on turn 4 into that lane and later Killmonger that Nova, the Cull Obsidian's gonna stay there. And a 4/10 is better than most other 3-cost cards that are gonna get ramped up anyway. So by putting both Magic and Sarah in here, we are gonna have a tremendous amount of play on turns 4, 5, 6, and 7 without needing to have priority earlier on in the game, because we also are putting Black Swan, who isn't necessary, but it's a great backup plan. So say you get to turn 3 and now you've got nothing, but you do finally draw your top end of that 1-drop. So now you can drop the Black Swan down on to turn 3, plus Cull Obsidian and a Forge on turn 4. It's a really beefy 12-drop for turn 4, and I'm pretty happy about that, and I think you will be too in Cull Surfidian. This is a little bit of a cheeky build, I know it, but I have a feeling that he is going to have a pretty decent home in these Killmonger, Nova, Forge decks, where we do, of course, have your Brood, Forge, Absman combination. We have Shaw with Nakia, but there are still so many ways to ramp up that Sebastian Shaw. I don't think we're going to need to justify anymore trying to put in Okoye. Nakia is great for pretty much every card in here anyway, so I think this is a pretty well-rounded Surfer build, and I hope you enjoy this one too. Have you been convinced? Are you getting Cull Obsidian? Most likely, if you have the resources for it. I think this is going to be a very solid week, a very solid card. Please let me know down in the comments which of these decks was your favorite and which is going to be the first one you load out if you actually do unlock Cull Obsidian. Thank you guys so much for watching, and please like, comment, subscribe. See y'all next time.